Well, thank you very much, Rolf, Todd, and Evie for this invitation. I really thank God for the huge privilege to be here with you all, sharing and also learning together. Just so you know, I'm married to Anna, and we have 4 little children. I have a recent picture here of Matteo, who is 5, Raffaello 3, Pietro and Valentina, who are just 3 months old. So you heard me well. Pietro and Valentina are twins, and they've been born only 3 months ago. So being here, sleeping comfortably all night long is like a holiday for me. But my parents are over back in Granada, southern Spain, helping us out. So in case you also want to help, I will leave my bank account for donations towards nappies or diapers, okay? I'm sure that one of the dreams we all share is to see a transformed Europe that recognizes the lordship of Jesus. Now, Europe, with approximately 700 million people, has the lowest evangelical percentage of any continent. Around 20 European countries have less than 1% of evangelicals. It's interesting, in Western Europe, for instance, in 1900, we had almost 100% people who call themselves Christians. Whereas in 2010, 69 would describe themselves as Christians. That is the greatest decline in the entire world over the previous century. This is a map of Christian growth, and the gray areas is where the church is growing the least in our world today. And as you can appreciate, Europe is one of these places. In Northern Europe, for instance, in 1970, 8.7% of the people described themselves as agnostics, whereas in 2010 that has gone up to 17.7%. This is, for instance, from Vista, showing the belief in God by country and age cohort in Europe. And as you can appreciate, the older the population grows, the belief in God also grows as well in all these European countries. And the contrary is also true. This is people who describe themselves as atheists in Europe, and the younger they are, the highest number of atheists we will find. And of course, although many people in Europe today still describe themselves as Christians or religious, that is the case in Southern Europe, for example. We know that the majority actually think and behave as secularists. And even within many circles of the European Protestant Church, we are living a tremendous crisis in which what we always held as immoral and contrary to God's will is now accepted and celebrated in the name of diversity or tolerance. Now, talking specifically about the young people in Europe, because within the challenge that Europe represents, the segment of the European society, I think where we observe the greatest challenges are the young people. There are around 100 million young people between the ages of 15 and 29 in Europe. Though let's step back for a moment and see some numbers in the world. Some of them Evie has already very well shared with us. Just over half of the world's population is under the age of 30. Asia, for instance, has the largest number of young people, around 800 million. That number has nearly tripled since 1950. There are almost 2 billion young people in the world between the ages of 10 and 24. And according to the World Health Organization, for the group between 15 and 34 years of age, suicide is today one of the 3 leading causes of death. And it's the second largest cause of mortality in the age group of 10 to 24. As Mark Green has observed, a culture that cannot answer its own questions is a culture open to an answer. So sisters and brothers, I think you will agree with me when I say that more than ever before in history, today we must think intentionally, strategically, and urgently about missions and the youth culture. And not only that, it is also vital that we reflect together on the formation and engagement of today's and tomorrow's young leaders. Therefore, I want to applaud once again the network leaders for inviting us to think together this morning about young people. And we could spend days considering this issue, especially in such a nice hotel. But as I only have about 13 minutes left, please allow me to suggest four priorities, 4 focuses that I think we all must embrace in our local churches, agencies, organizations, ministries, educational institutions, and alliances as we face the gigantic challenge and calling of reaching the emerging generations. First of all, we must be present, invest, and create content for social media and technology in general. We millennials, or Generation Y, those of us born between 1980 and 1997, love technology, especially smartphones, as we all know. Almost 90% of 18 to 24-year-old smartphone owners reach for their device within 15 minutes of waking up, according to a survey in the US, though I'm sure it's not very different from us here. Africa is the second biggest mobile market in the world, and smartphones outsell computers 4-1. A Financial Times survey cited by China Daily showed that 92% of Chinese 18 to 30-year-olds owned a smartphone, and 58% of internet users in China are millennials. So if technology is so part of millennials' lives, what should we say about the even younger ones, Generation Z or Z, or those born around after 1997, or those born after 2000, whom some are just suggesting we call them Generation Alpha. My boys, for instance, are part of this generation. I remember my boys often asking me or Anna or the great parents for the mobiles, and they want to watch YouTube. I presume some of you resonate with that, and you don't dare choose the cartoon for them. They want to choose themselves. And I remember one of my sons getting my laptop and being impatient because he touched the screen and nothing happened. That's how they grow up. So for many teenagers today, Facebook is the past. It's in the past. Their parents and grandparents are there, so they are crowding to new and more dynamic social networks like Snapchat, where you share pictures or short videos, which then disappears in just a few hours. I don't know if you know this young man. His name is Felix from Sweden, and he's an extremely well-known YouTuber celebrity. His channel has almost 50 million subscribers. That's equivalent to the whole population of Spain. YouTubers, people who create content for YouTube, are now the new popular celebrities among the youth. Surveys demonstrate that YouTube stars are not just popular, they are truly influential figures for their young fans. Studies show that young people are more influenced by them than by TV or movie celebrities, because YouTubers are perceived as authentic and ordinary. I therefore can relate to them. A United Nations report on youth affirms, this is a world in which multinational corporations and advertising agencies are competing with family and school to become the most influential institutions in young people's lives. So I would like to suggest that we need to recognize that social media is one of the main areopagus of our present and our future. We all remember that Dr. Luke tells us that after arguing in the synagogue and in the marketplace of Athens, the Apostle Paul is asked by curious philosophers to present his message to the Areopagus. The Areopagus was a formal court in Athens, and also the name of a hill where the court sometimes met. There is some controversy among interpreters to which Luke was referring to, but that's secondary. What is important is the fact that Paul was communicating the gospel where ideas and worldviews were shaped in the world of his time. Anyone from anywhere can create any content that could potentially be seen by anybody in any part of the world today. Influence today is polycentric. Do you know which is the #1 country in the world with the most YouTube users? The answer is Saudi Arabia. And the majority of them are women. The most watched YouTube content category in Saudi Arabia is education. And maybe you're thinking the same as I am. What are we doing with the unprecedented possibility of sharing the good news literally to millions upon millions who have been shaped through the content they experience in social media, including young people in Europe? The communication revolution we are living has drastically changed the way people think, decide, reflect, pay attention, donate, and relate. It brings such major challenge not only in communication, but ethical and moral as well. If a 13-year-old boy just a few years ago wanted to access pornography, then he would have to somehow get a magazine from an adult. Today, they access it at any time through their smartphones. I was reading a recent survey about sexting, sending or exchanging sexually explicit or suggestive messages or images electronically. A survey done in the UK with various young people. And they revealed that 37% of the young people had sent a naked photo of themselves, and 24% had seen that image shared without their consent. And the article goes on to talk about Chloe, a girl who attempted suicide several times after a boy shared this selfie on Facebook. If we are serious about influencing the youth of today and tomorrow, we must be present in their areopagus. We need to be present, invest, and create content for social media and technology in general. Some friends in Spain created a campaign called Jesus on the Web. Everything is done online and through social media. 2015, they had about 300,000 people touched through these initiatives in several Spanish-speaking countries. 1 year later, they doubled the number of people they were reaching throughout this online campaign. The second focus and priority I want to draw your attention to is the multi-generational leadership. I think we should embrace the formation of multi-generational leadership, and that is a leadership that is formed by people from different generations. Please, I don't want to generalize, but in many evangelical circles, when we have a serious concern for the new generations, we tend to create a specific youth department or commission or area that is focused on reaching them. That is, of course, wonderful and necessary, but I want to suggest it is not enough. And this might be one of the main reasons why we are not up to the colossal challenge and calling in front of us. We must go further, I think. I would like to suggest that our core leadership circles, that could be our boards, directive teams, councils, whatever body or group of people who are shaping our organizations and churches, should be formed by people from different generations. Do we see the impressive potential it has? Multi-generational teams are more sensitive to the radical changes in our world because people from different generations have their fingers on different parts of the pulse of the world, and therefore each feed their perception and wisdom in order to shape the response of the church, project, or organization they are a part of. This is, of course, not a new idea. It is the biblical pattern of leadership. We can think of Jesus calling young men, probably in their early 20s, to be part of his leadership team. And as they did mission together, isn't that what the Apostle Paul did with Timothy, Titus, and others? Please make a mental exercise right now. What is the age of those placed in the most influential roles in your teams, churches, and organizations? I'm not saying they should all be young. No. Definitely not. The leadership team, I believe, should be multi-generational. I must confess this has been one of the exciting aspects of the life of C29 Granada, the local church, or the expression of the churches, as I prefer to describe local churches, that we planted in southern Spain. At our core leadership team, we have a young man in his late 20s, two of us in our 30s, two in their 40s, and one in his 70s. And we learn a lot together. According to an article in the Harvard Business Review, for the first time in history, 5 generations will soon be working side by side. That's a reality in many parts of the world, to the changing economic climate, extended life expectancy, and the desire and need many have to remain active. And at the same time, The world is changing so quickly that the amount of years to describe a certain generation will shrink. John Ortberg, in a very provocative article in Christianity Today called The Gap, wrote, "There is an old saying in the church world, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always control. And when it comes to generations working together, the question of control is never more than about a micron below the surface." He also wrote, "We can't say we are faithful. Good luck to whoever comes next." Some time ago, Anna and our boys went to a free jazz concert in Granada, where we live. It was good, it was free, so it was perfect. Traditionally, a jazz band is formed by 4 or 5 musicians who, although playing in the same rhythm, each will get the chance to improvise and become the main protagonist in the concert. The jazz culture from the beginning encouraged young musicians to play with more experienced ones and learn from them as they play together and are in action together. I think you know where I'm going. I think I speak on behalf of young leaders in some of our evangelical circles when I ask my beloved and more experienced sisters and brothers, can we please play with you? We must serve together. We all know we can be stronger and way more relevant if we play together in the same band. The type of music we play together will be much more in tune with our complex world today. The sort of music we can create together is much more likely to be heard by the world around us. Don't you agree? Thirdly, and more quickly, I would highlight the priority as we seek to reach young people, particularly in Europe, should be the verbal proclamation of God's word. We surely cannot generalize, but I think we find in many European contexts that the evangelical church has lost confidence in the verbal proclamation of God's word, particularly when the issue is preaching to young people. We don't have time to make an extensive examination of this reality, but just let me invite you to take a couple of minutes to reflect on our contemporary reluctance regarding the need and effectiveness of proclamation. Some say technology has diminished our attention span and people no longer want or can pay attention to discourses. If so, why have TED Talks become so popular nowadays? And people still love watching stand-up comedians and monologues. Why do speeches still move the hearts and minds of people in real life or movies in ways that no other medium can? Some say we need to move away from one person dropping information about others who are simply passive. But is that what preaching really is? Isn't Jonathan Edwards right when he observed the main benefit obtained by preaching is by the impression made upon the mind at that time, and not by an effect that arises afterwards, by a remembrance of what was delivered? In other words, we know that something happens when God speaks. Some say preaching is passé. Our learning should always be collaborative, and the group should always dialogue and form their conclusions. Could one of the reasons some think like that be actually a reaction against authority, or a difficulty to submit to authority so common in our postmodern way of thinking and living? Could it be that hearing another human being speaking to a group, or watching a human being perform a speech act, to borrow the language from linguistics, in front of others, resonates and connects with others, connects with our intrinsic nature in ways that no other act does? And could this be true because our Creator, the one true God, is by nature a speaking God? As we know, God creates the world through His Word. In the Old Testament, whenever God wanted to change the world or His people, He called people who spoke on His behalf. The one who prepared the way for the Lord, His cousin John the Baptist, did so mainly through his preaching. The biographies of Jesus, the evangelists, quote him saying to his followers, "We must go on to other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That is why I came." Dr. Luke narrates the phenomenal growth of the early church taking place primarily through the preaching of the apostles. The history of the church shows us that one of the key elements in genuine revivals have been the preaching of God's word. So why would some of us enthusiastically quote, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words"? That's surely not biblical. perhaps the pendulum has swung to the other side. It is true that for a long time we evangelicals, mainly in the Western, were guilty of embracing a reductionist gospel that had very little to say about poverty, a fair economic system, political corruption, human slavery, or other social needs. This certainly cannot happen, but we should not allow the pendulum to swing to the other side and forget that we are called to proclaim to the young generation as well, and also form those who will be proclaiming to their generation. That has been one of the greatest joys for us as we saw the establishment of a program for young evangelists, connecting, recruiting, and equipping young people in Spain that are proclaiming to the new generations. And finally, to conclude, I think one of our priorities should be to see a new generation of church planters. Sisters and brothers, we must motivate, equip, and resource a new generation of church planters. We know of the huge need of new expressions of the church in Europe. In places like southern Spain, in southern Europe, like Spain, for instance, this is not Spain with chicken pox, okay? But all the red spots are towns and cities with more than 3,000 people without any evangelical or Protestant church. We need desperately new expression of the church all over Europe. And if we are to connect with the emerging generation, we also need to see young church planters planting these churches and connecting to their communities. Therefore, let me just encourage us, finally, to become Paul to the Timothys in Europe. We must motivate a new generation of church planters and let them know we are behind them and we are supporting them. Let's equip them and help them on the how to do it in Europe today. And finally, let's resource them with boldness and encouragement as we seek to reach the youth in Europe. May the Lord of the mission give us wisdom and boldness as we embrace the calling to touch the youth in the power of His Spirit, for His glory and for the extension of His kingdom throughout all generations. Thank you very much.